In the spring of 2013, archaeologists working along Egypt's Red Sea coast opened a storage gallery that had been sealed for more than 4,000 years. The site was called Wadi El Jaf. Today, desert stretches toward the mountains and the Red Sea. There are no pyramids, royal tombs, or temples nearby. But beneath the cliffs, ancient Egyptians had cut galleries deep into the rock. They had once used them to store boats, ropes, tools, and supplies for voyages across the Red Sea. When French archaeologist Pierre Talit and his team cleared one of those galleries, they found hundreds of fragments of papyrus. They were the oldest written papyri ever discovered. Documents from the reign of Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid. You might expect something sacred. A prayer for the king, a ritual meant to carry his soul into the afterlife. Perhaps even a lost account explaining the pyramid. Instead, the documents contained schedules, deliveries, crew assignments, the day-to-day paperwork of men simply doing their jobs. One set of records had been written by an inspector named Mera. He commanded roughly 40 men and recorded their journeys, overnight stops, officials, and schedules. During the final years of Khufu's reign, Mera and his crew transported fine limestone from the quarries at Tura to a place called Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, the Great Pyramid. For the first time, archaeologists could read the words of someone involved in its construction. Not a pharaoh, not a priest, not a Greek historian, arriving thousands of years later. A working supervisor with a crew, a schedule, and stone that had to arrive on time. But Mera's diary created two problems. The first was historical. For more than 2,000 years, one of the world's most enduring stories claimed that the Great Pyramid had been built by an immense army of slaves, men driven by force to drag stones for the tomb of a tyrant. Yet Mera did not describe a slave camp. He described an administration. The second problem was physical. Mera wrote about boats, canals, harbors, and repeated journeys toward Giza through a landscape dominated by water. Yet the Great Pyramid now rises from the edge of a desert. There is no river at its base, no visible harbor, no canal large enough to receive fleets carrying stone. So, which story was true? Had generations misunderstood the people who built the pyramid? And if Mera's diary was accurate, where had his river gone? To understand why the slave story lasted so long, we have to begin with the man who gave it to history. More than 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid was completed, a Greek traveler arrived in Egypt. His name was Herodotus. He came from a world in which Egypt was already impossibly old. The Great Pyramid was more ancient to Herodotus than Herodotus is to us. Its builders were long dead. The construction settlement had disappeared. The ramps were gone. The waterways had changed. The tools had been removed, recycled, buried, or lost. Herodotus saw the monument. He did not see the machine that had raised it. He asked Egyptians living in his own time what had happened. The story he recorded was dark. According to Herodotus, Khufu closed temples, stopped sacrifices, and forced the Egyptian people to work for him. One group dragged stone from the quarries to the Nile. Another received the blocks on the opposite side and moved them toward the plateau. The labor was divided into rotating groups, and Herodotus placed the number of workers at 100,000 men. Standing beneath the Great Pyramid, the number may not have seemed impossible. The monument originally stood almost 500 feet tall and contained more than 2 million limestone blocks. Enormous granite beams had traveled from southern Egypt. Its sides were aligned with astonishing precision, and polished white casing once reflected the Egyptian sun. The scale demanded an explanation equal to the monument. A powerful king, an entire nation forced into service, thousands suffering beneath the weight of the stones. Herodotus supplied the story. Later generations supplied the images. Paintings showed endless lines of laborers straining against ropes. Books described men crushed beneath stone. Films added whips, chains, shouting overseers, and a pharaoh watching as slaves built his path to immortality. The scene became so familiar that it stopped feeling like an interpretation, and parts of the ancient evidence appeared to fit. Egyptian art shows large groups of men pulling heavy objects on sledges. The state demanded labor, taxes, and goods from the communities under its control. This was not a modern workforce. The people involved did not freely negotiate contracts or choose among competing employers. The pharaoh's government could compel people to serve. But compelled labor is not necessarily the same thing as the popular image of a permanently enslaved population, chained together and worked until death. For centuries, that distinction was difficult to make because the builders had left almost no story the modern world could read. Khufu's pyramid contains no complete building manual. No ancient historian watched the first block rise and recorded the process from beginning to end. Herodotus had one enormous advantage. His was one of the only stories available. Then the workers began returning. South of the Sphinx, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a large settlement. It contained streets, courtyards, storage areas, workshops, administrative buildings, and facilities capable of producing food on an industrial scale. This was not a scattering of tents beside a construction site. It was a carefully organized community built to sustain the people working around the pyramid complexes. Archaeologists found enormous quantities of animal bones, cattle, sheep, goats. They found evidence of large-scale bread production and brewing. The builders had to be fed every day for years. The settlement also revealed hierarchy. Some workers lived better and ate higher status food than others. There were laborers, specialists, administrators, sailors, craftsmen, and people supporting the workforce without moving stone themselves. The work was physically punishing, but this was not an anonymous crowd abandoned to survive. It was a labor force being fed, housed, and organized by the state. Then archaeologists found the dead. Near the pyramids were graves associated with workers and officials connected to the construction community. Some were simple. Others were more elaborate. The bodies carried evidence of hard lives, damaged joints, worn spines, and broken bones. These were the injuries of people spending years around stone, ropes, boats, sledges, and heavy loads. But some of those injuries had healed. Bones had been set. Workers had survived accidents serious enough to remove them from labor for weeks or months. Someone continued feeding them while they recovered. Someone treated them, and when they died, they were buried near the monuments they had helped create. None of this means pyramid construction was gentle. It was not. None of it proves that every worker arrived willingly. Some labor may have been required as service to the state, but the evidence overturns the simplest version of the old story. The Great Pyramid was not built by a disposable mass of chained slaves whose lives meant nothing to Egypt. It was built through an organized labor system containing skilled permanent workers, rotating crews, administrators, sailors, craftsmen, farmers, bakers, brewers, herders, and others whose work supported the construction. Then Merer's diary appeared, and the silent buildings at Giza gained a voice. Merer did not describe the entire project. His surviving records come from late in Khufu's reign, when much of the monument was probably already complete. The limestone his crew transported from Tura was high-quality stone used in the pyramid complex, including the fine outer casing. But the diary reveals how one important part of the operation functioned. Mirror's crew traveled to Tura. They loaded limestone onto boats. They moved through waterways toward Giza. They stopped for the night. They reported to officials. They delivered the stone. Then they returned and repeated the journey. The record is dry. It is repetitive. That is what makes it extraordinary. A legend would describe the glory of Khufu. A royal inscription would praise the king's power. Mera recorded the work. The quarry had to cut the stone. The crew had to load it. The water and harbor had to remain usable. Officials had to know where each delivery belonged. Food had to reach the workers. Boats, ropes, and tools had to be maintained, and someone had to record whether the stone arrived. The old slave story reduced the construction to force. King gives an order. An overseer raises a whip. A laborer pulls. But force alone cannot explain the Great Pyramid. Thousands of separate tasks had to happen in the correct order across decades that required organization on a national scale. Mirror was one small piece of it. Other crews moved granite and food, quarried local limestone, shaped blocks, prepared roads, maintained boats, produced provisions, repaired equipment, and kept records of their own. Most of their documents are gone. Most of their names are gone. But Mera's diary proves that the system existed. There was only one problem. The landscape described in his records seemed impossible. Mera repeatedly traveled by boat toward the pyramid, but anyone standing at Giza today sees dry ground. The Nile flows east of the plateau. Even before Cairo expanded across the floodplain, the pyramid appeared separated from the river. How could boats carrying tons of limestone have reached the construction site? The answer had been hiding underground. The Nile has never followed one unchanging path. Across thousands of years, its channels shifted. Branches opened, narrowed, filled with sediment, or disappeared. Settlements once built beside water were left inland. In 2024, researchers published a study mapping the remains of a major extinct branch of the Nile along Egypt's western desert margin. They called it the Aramat branch. The Pyramid branch, it once ran beside a long chain of pyramid fields, including Giza, Abusir, Saqqara, and Dashur. Land that now appears separated from the Nile had once been connected by a substantial waterway near the monuments. The researchers used radar satellite imagery, geophysical surveys, and sediment cores to trace the buried channel. The pyramid complexes contained another clue. Many pyramids were linked to the floodplain by long causeways. At the lower end stood valley temples. Today, some appear to terminate in dry land. But when placed against the ancient branch, they reach toward the former water. The temples may also have served as arrival points, where people, supplies, and stone transferred from boats to land. The discovery did not recreate every canal or prove the precise route of Mera's boats. Ancient Egyptians probably modified the landscape with basins, canals, quays, and other engineered features. But the central contradiction disappeared. Mera described a world of boats because the Great Pyramid had been built in a world of water. The monument did not stand alone in an empty desert. It stood above a transportation network. Stone could cross the river by boat. Granite could be floated north. Food and supplies could be shipped toward the workforce. The river was one of the machines that made the project possible. Then the waterways shifted. Channels filled with silt. The floodplain changed. The living connection between the pyramid and the river disappeared. Later visitors saw a monument stranded beside the desert and tried to imagine millions of blocks being dragged across open sand. They were looking at the wrong landscape. The pyramid survived. Its infrastructure vanished. That may be the reason the construction began to look impossible. A finished monument hides the process that created it. The casing concealed the core. The completed courses concealed the routes used to reach them. The desert concealed the harbor. Stone survived while wood, rope, mud brick, copper, papyrus, and human memory disappeared. But recovering the river and the workers does not answer every question. It tells us who organized the construction, how important materials reached Giza, and what sustained many of the workers. It does not explain how every block was raised. So what do we actually know? Most of the Great Pyramid was built from limestone quarried near the plateau. The builders did not carry every block across Egypt. The finest white casing stone came from Tura across the Nile. Granite used inside the pyramid came from Aswan in southern Egypt. Those materials traveled by water whenever possible. Near the construction area, workers moved blocks on wooden sledges. Ancient Egyptian images show large objects being hauled this way. Experiments suggest that dampening sand in front of a sledge could reduce the force required to pull it. Ramps were also used in Egyptian construction. Remains of ramps have been found at quarries and building sites. The builders understood how to create sloped surfaces from earth, rubble, stone, and timber. What we do not know is the exact arrangement used for every stage of the Great Pyramid. A single straight ramp to the summit creates serious problems. As the pyramid rises, the ramp must become longer and larger to maintain a manageable slope. A ramp wrapping around the exterior uses less material, but may obstruct the corners and faces needed for accurate measurement. Other theories propose combinations. A straight ramp for lower courses, smaller ramps higher up, paths wrapping around part of the structure, levers near the summit, internal routes built into the monument as it rose. The builders may have changed techniques as the structure grew. A system effective near the ground could become useless near the top. Smaller limestone blocks could be handled differently from enormous granite beams. The honest answer is not that we have no idea how the Great Pyramid was built. We know a great deal about quarrying, water transport, sledges, ramps, labor, surveying, and administration. The honest answer is that no single reconstruction has explained every stage beyond dispute. And the pyramid still contains physical evidence we cannot fully interpret. Beginning in 2015, the Scan Pyramids project used particles called muons to examine the interior without drilling through the stone. Muons constantly fall through the atmosphere and pass through material that stops ordinary light. By placing detectors inside and around the pyramid, researchers could measure how many particles arrived from different directions. Where more passed through than expected, there was less stone. An empty space. In 2017, the project announced a large void above the Grand Gallery. The result was confirmed using multiple detection methods. The space appears to extend for at least 100 feet. But no one knows exactly what it is. It may be one large chamber. It may consist of several connected spaces. It could relieve pressure on structures below. It could be connected to construction. It may never have been intended for anyone to enter. The scans revealed its existence. They did not reveal its purpose. That is where the Great Pyramid stands today, between knowledge and mystery. We know ancient Egyptians built it during Khufu's reign. We know where much of the stone originated and how waterways brought materials toward Giza. We know sledges, ramps, ropes, levers, and human labor played roles. We know the workforce was organized and divided into crews, and we possess the diary of a man transporting stone toward the project. What we do not possess is a surviving master plan. We cannot reconstruct the exact lifting sequence at every height. We cannot yet explain every hidden space. Those are real mysteries. But they are far narrower than the claim that the construction is completely unknown. And the human explanation does not make the pyramid less impressive. It makes it more impressive. Human beings had to solve each problem one at a time. The stone, the river, the flood, the slope, the rope, the food supply, the limits of the human body, and of the state attempting to organize it. They had no steel cranes, no diesel engines, no trucks, no electronic communication. They had boats, sledges, ramps, copper tools, stone pounders, surveying knowledge, written records, and thousands of people whose work could be concentrated on one project. That concentration may be the real secret. When people picture the Great Pyramid being built, they look toward the top. But the construction began much farther away, in fields producing grain, in pastures raising livestock, in mines, quarries, workshops, bakeries, and offices where scribes recorded what had arrived and what was still missing. Giza was the final point where all of those systems met. To sustain the project, Egypt had to count more carefully, plan farther ahead, move resources across greater distances, divide labor into specialized groups, and coordinate officials who might never meet the king. The pyramid demanded logistics, records, specialization, and government capable of turning resources scattered across a kingdom into stone, rising on one plateau. We often describe the Great Pyramid as the product of Egyptian civilization, the ultimate expression of a state that had already become powerful. But the relationship may have worked in both directions. The state built the pyramid, and the effort required to build the pyramid strengthened the state. Mira could not have understood that. He was not writing history. He was keeping track of work. His crew loaded limestone. They traveled. They unloaded. They returned. There was always another delivery and another line to add to the papyrus. Then the work ended. The galleries at Wadi El Jarf were closed. The harbor fell silent. The waterways around Giza shifted. The workers died. Their settlement disappeared beneath the sand. Herodotus arrived more than 2,000 years later and heard a story about a cruel king and 100,000 laborers. The world repeated it because the people who knew the construction had vanished, but not completely. Their bones remained. Their homes remained. The river remained as sediment beneath the earth, and Mera's handwriting remained on fragments of papyrus beside the Red Sea. His diary did not contain a secret machine. It did not explain every ramp, chamber, or stone. It preserved something more ordinary, the Great Pyramid as work, human work, organized across distances and repeated across years until millions of individual tasks became a mountain. Khufu's power mattered, but power alone could not move the stone. Egypt had to build a system capable of carrying out his command. And in learning how to build the pyramid, Egypt may have built itself.